Hello, my name is Paul Stewart and today I'm heading off to Japan, which is a country I quite like to visit as I find the history very interesting and I quite like the culture where everything is very organised, very clean and everyone is always very friendly. Now whenever I visit a new country I like to check out their national airline, so coming up is my review of the Japan Airlines business class product in the Boeing 787 Dreamliner from Sydney through to Tokyo. As always, the journey begins at check-in where I dropped off my bag and got my boarding pass. I was given a card to get through the express customs and you will find that pathway right behind the Qantas check-in counters. Japan Airlines don't have their own lounge at Sydney, so they used their one-world partner, Qantas's business lounge. I actually found out today that there's a complete refurbishment that's due to begin in 2 months, but here it is anyway at approximately 6:30 in the morning. There is a buffet breakfast and after around 8:30 there is a plate of the day service which will be served to your table, and there is also fresh barista made coffee. Luckily for me, I've reached Emerald status with the One World Alliance, so I was granted access to the Qantas First Lounge, which as you can see is pretty impressive. Now I should clarify that unfortunately a business class ticket alone won't get you into this lounge. Breakfast continued with some fruit juice followed by a cup of coffee and then some plane spotting. As you can see, it's Airbus A380 Central in Sydney this morning, and thankfully we should see them in our skies for well over another 10 years, although it's sad to hear that production is ceasing. My flight was called and I took off to the gate. Now here's our aircraft for the flight, a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. This particular one first flew in 2016 and is powered by a General Electric engine, which is probably why it's not in a maintenance shed I suppose. Boarding was called and I headed on board early to get some filming done. Now there are 2 business cabins on board, with my seat 3A being in the forward one. The seats are in a 2-2-2 layout, although as you can see they all still have direct aisle access. The middle seats are best for couples as they're directly next to each other, while the window seats are slightly staggered, allowing easy access for window seats to the aisle. But having said that, window seats would still be fine for couples as you can still turn your head around and say g'day. Now I'll quickly go through this seat in more detail, beginning with the power plugs, which are within easy reach. Above that is the in-flight entertainment remote, and underneath that is the fold-out table. Now this would turn to the side, allowing you to escape your seat during meal service. Here are the buttons to control the seats, and further on is another reading lamp and headphones holder. In front of you is a TV screen with a reasonable sized ledge, and another ledge below that also works as a footrest and the end of the bed. And right above you are more lights, but unfortunately there's no air vents. I find aircraft cabins usually quite hot, so I really like a constant flow of air, so that's rather unfortunate. Here's a privacy barrier going up and the seat folding completely flat. Next up is the amenity kit, and I'll be giving this away to a lucky subscriber, with details later on in the video. Some lucky soul will be able to take home this medication stick, which sounds suspicious. A choice of juice or champagne was brought around on a plastic cup, and here's the slippers and noise cancelling headphones, which you can store on this nifty spot just above the reading lamp. Now there are no PJs provided, although you do get this jacket, which you'll see me modelling later on. We backed out and the engines started spinning. Now one thing I really like about JAL is the ground crew do this bow and wave every single time the aircraft leaves. It's obviously unnecessary and time consuming, although it's a wonderful little piece of Japanese culture. Now here is another Airbus A380, and then it was our turn. I'll speed up through most of the takeoff and will upload the full takeoff footage in a separate video on my second channel, Paul Stewart Extra, and a link to that will be in the video description below. As we broke through the clouds, I had this opportunity to play with the windows. Now I've been a critic of them, and I find they draw out the colours when I'm attempting to take photos, and also the crew can lock them in the dark setting, stopping you from enjoying the view. But thankfully the window dimming was completely under my control on this flight. After a minute or two they get to the darkest setting, although as you can see here they still struggle in direct sunlight. By the way, I did find this view of the aircraft's shadow pretty cool, and you can see the chemtrails being dumped over Byron Bay, which seems appropriate. Next up, a warm towel was brought around and I headed into the bathroom to check out this jacket. The bathroom itself is perfectly adequate with the usual amenities here for your taking. There was also this cool little card from the crew in both English and Japanese. Now I really like PJs as they keep your regular clothes fresh, although it became obvious that I was meant to keep those clothes on rather than just wear the jacket. Comment below and let me know what you think. I reckon I was probably one of the coolest people inside the toilet, and I'm fairly sure I'll regret uploading this photo to the internet. Anyway, I put on my normal clothes and returned to my seat. The journey continued up north over Queensland, and I'd like to mention these two very Australian locations, Mount Lindsay and Slaughterhouse Pinnacle. Now if you know the origin of the second one's name, please comment below. What became evident as well was how dry everything was. International viewers may not realise that Australia is going through a drought at the moment, and a few months ago I took part in the Drought Relief Qantas event to Longreach, and a link to that is in the video description below. A big shout out to our farmers doing it tough down there. The meal service began with a round of drinks and I continued with the champagne. Japan Airlines offer both a Japanese and a Western option, and I went with the former. Now I really enjoy the intricate little bits of food and frankly have no idea what I'm eating most of the time, and I will post up the menus at the end of the video. The appetizer was salmon and chicken and tasted great. Following that was the main course, most of which I can't identify, and I'm not sure if it was actually the same as what was on the menu. There's this cool little chopstick holder, although I realised afterwards I was using it incorrectly. For the second main, there was this grilled cod and simmered shrimp with veggies, and of course there was rice and miso soup. By the way, this ledge is perfectly sized for an iPhone 8, in case you were wondering. And finally, some plum wine and a blueberry cake for dessert, and some green tea. Another towel was brought around and a bottle of water. As I mentioned before, the table does swivel around, so you can escape for a stroll during meal service, which is useful to know. We continued north along Queensland's coast and flew up what I'm assuming was the Great Barrier Reef. A top-up of the plum wine was brought around and I reclined to watch the in-flight entertainment. I must admit that I found it a little clunky and the list of TV shows and movies would only come up on the remote rather than the big screen, so you couldn't really search that well. I also found the content was a little limited, although the actual screen quality was fine and the in-flight map was always a cool feature. I might mention here too that I found this seat is really well designed. People may wonder if it's a little claustrophobic, although I found it easily spacious enough and obviously very private. Next up was a JAL original drink called Sky Team Kiwi, which tasted fine and a cup of coffee. Now, flying as much as I do, I've come to really appreciate a good crew, and I must admit that it would be very tough with the jet lag, sleeping in hotels and working in very cramped conditions in the galleys. The nature of the service industry is that they probably only get feedback when it's negative, so I've started bringing chocolates as a token of my appreciation. It's certainly something worth considering if you fly frequently and are usually very well looked after. Just behind my seat in the middle galley was a collection of self-serve items and some cool coasters, which are quite literally now on my dining table. I watched a movie for a few hours before selecting more to eat. There's a single meal provided, so anything further will have to be requested from the Anytime You Wish menu. For second lunch, I started with their Japanese hot udon noodles and of course, what goes with soup, wine. A Sauv Blanc from New Zealand. Following that were sandwiches, salmon cream cheese and roast beef, and both tasted great. Now, unlike the sandwiches I've had from a particular airline that frequents Heathrow and rhymes with Mitish Pairways, they used bread rather than concrete slabs, and they didn't even taste like they'd been in the fridge for days. For sandwiches, I was actually really impressed. And for second dessert, I had cheese, fruit and more plum wine. I then killed some time watching BBC News streamed and, of course, believing everything they say because the British accent is just intrinsically intelligent sounding, and enjoyed the view as we crossed Japan's coastline. Overall, I thought this was a really good flight. I really like the seat design and find them to be really private, yet not too claustrophobic. Now, having said that, there is limited enclosed storage, although the aisle seats on the sides do have this semi-enclosed area, which would be perfectly sized for a small bag or laptop. I think they're moving to the standard reverse herringbone shape that everyone else is using, although I think I'll miss this design. The service was really good, as was the food and drink. Now, the in-flight entertainment screen was fine, although, as I said before, the actual content was lacking. Unless I was using it incorrectly, and I don't feel like I'm that technologically inept, I couldn't actually find much to watch. Japan Airlines often offer well-priced business fares through to Europe for Australians, so they're certainly worth considering. I'll certainly fly with them again, and in fact I'm doing so tomorrow, but in first class, so make sure you subscribe and check the notification bell so that YouTube tells you as soon as I've uploaded a new video. And finally, the amenity kit, plus a few other goodies, which I'll give away to a subscriber. To enter in the giveaway, simply comment below including the text JAL giveaway, and in 30 days I'll select a winner. Full details are in the video description below. And if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and check out my channel for heaps more similar videos. Thanks for watching and enjoy the sunset landing into Tokyo's Narita airport and then the menus.